Come on,
All right.
Stephen.
All right.
I don't even know if I'll be on camera for this part and whether that's going to pick up me talking,
right.
just for the sake of the video that we're putting this together with too. But of course, everybody here for the Potter's Church, thank you all for being here for our special Loop Group time that we've got going on this week, where we're having a presentation instead of our normal discussion time that we have. A few months ago, Stephen Pasedag here, we helped to support his mission trip to Argentina. He went for the Moody Bible Institute. Dad's trying to distract Stephen, and he's working to distract me, so that's really effective. But in any case, Stephen went for his internship for his studies, and so we assisted with that. Now he's back and wants to share some of what he accomplished, what he did, what he learned down there. So that's what we are welcoming him for today. So just everybody can give him a hand to welcome him. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, all right, so as Stan said, I'm Stephen. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Stephen.
Yeah, and yeah, just so that everyone's on the same page before I get into like some of the people I met and things that God showed me while I was in Argentina, I kind of want to explain why I ended up there and yeah, just some stuff about me. So first off, I am a recent graduate of the Moody Bible Institute. And there, thank you, and there everyone is required to do an internship. Of course, it's usually related to your major, but it's also always related with ministry somehow. And I am a linguistics major, so one of the things that means is I have to work with a ministry, but also that I have to go to some country with some language I don't know anything about and try to learn that, not only learn that language, but also write papers on it, dissect it, analyze it, and yeah, so I know what some of you might be thinking, like linguistics, dissecting, that sounds kind of boring, and it is boring, so I'm not going to talk about that part, so you don't have to worry about that. I'm only going to talk about the ministry side of it. And yeah, so how I found out about the specific ministry that I went on was actually through a friend of mine who I know from rock climbing. And as you can see, oh, Zach took it away, but it's okay. There's actually someone rock climbing on there, but I don't know if you can even see that. But this ministry that I helped out with is really cool because it's a passion of mine, and that's with rock climbing, outdoors activities, stuff like that. My friend told me about a place in Argentina that was kind of a house that people could stay in, and travelers could come and visit, and you could take them out rock climbing, and then in the hopes of sharing the gospel with them. And I thought, that's so cool. I can't even believe that exists. Like, that's, like, imagine your favorite hobby, and then, like, you can, it's designed in a way that you can share about Jesus. It just seemed really cool. Come time for my internship, I decided to go there. And yeah, so you can move to the next one. Yeah, so it's in Argentina. Here it is on the world map. But if you go to the next one, I think I have specifically where I was this really long name that I'm not, which is San Carlos de Bariloche, Rio Negro, Argentina, which no one ever says that, so just say Bariloche is where we were. And if you see, it's right on the in between Chile and Argentina, and all along there is the Andes Mountains, which are a really beautiful mountain range. And that whole area is actually called Patagonia. If you guys know the clothing brand, that's where it comes from. It's from this region. It's really beautiful, and because of that, it's a kind of a mecca for rock climbers because it has some really awesome climbing. I think you can go to the next picture. Yeah, so for an example, this is just the backyard of where I stayed at. Literally, you walk out the door and there's just mountains everywhere. In fact, you can probably go through a few of the next ones until you see ones with people in it. There's one that's like a 15-minute drive. This is one we climbed at.
More slowly, Zachary.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the next one. This one's good climbing. Yeah. And this is the crew that I worked with. Yeah, so what the ministry specifically was, like I said, a little house right on the lake. It's called Shelter on the Lake. And it's run by a husband and a wife and some other volunteers that change every year. The husband and the wife, I just realized the husband's not in this picture. But the wife is the curly one back there. Sherry and Dylan Harris, and they're great people. And just to know a little bit about them, when they went to Argentina the first time, they came from Oregon, and they biked all the way there, which is insane. So that's just a little bit something about them. They're very adventurous, and yeah, they love Jesus. But yeah, so what the house is just a little house on the lake, and the idea is that it's all through word of mouth. Climbers will come from all around the world to come climb in this area because it's so sought after, and they'll tell each other about this house that they stay at for free. And we cook for them, we take them out climbing if they want, we have a car we can take them with, we take them hiking, kayaking, anything like that. And yeah, and so the idea is that as we're taking them out climbing, or even as we're cooking with them or whatever, we build relationships with them, and the goal is to eventually share the Gospels with them, which if you keep going, I think I have some more pictures. Yeah, like you can kind of get the idea. You're going on a long hike. You get to spend a lot of time with people and really get to know them and talk about things. And one of the cool things that I realized while I was there was that people really open up. I don't know if it's because they're kind of going on this big journey and they're kind of looking for something else along with the venture, or I don't know what, but people will just talk to you about anything. And so I have just a few of many people that I got to meet and had some really cool conversations with, and I just want to share a few of those with you. I don't know what the next picture is. I don't have picture. Yeah, it's just another one of, but you get the idea of, yeah, you're walking and you're talking. So yeah, but the first one I want to talk about was a guy from Israel. Oh, that was another thing I forgot to mention, is that Dylan and Sherry, they also have a big passion for Jewish people, because a lot of Israelis, once they're done with their mandatory service in their military, they like to go on a trip. And so anyone who likes to climb or anything like that, a lot of them come here. And so they just eventually started to house a lot of, and specifically try to reach to Jewish peoples. So yeah, so So yeah, the first guy I want to talk about his name was Amir. He was an Israeli, and he was visiting. And one of the days on Friday, which on Friday, every Friday they have a big meal, a Shabbat. If you don't know what that is, it's fine. I didn't either. Which is it's the beginning of their Sabbath. So they do it on Friday night, right before Saturday, which is their Sabbath. They have a big meal, and everyone gets together, and they talk, and it's a great time. But Dylan and Sherry, the Harrises, they like to use that opportunity because since everyone's going here, there, everywhere climbing, to have one day where everyone's together, eating a meal together, and then eventually have a Bible study. And so everyone comes together at the same table, and someone presents the gospel very clearly to all the visitors for that week. That's the whole idea. And so everyone has to take turns doing that. And one of the weeks it was my turn to do it, and I was a little bit nervous because I don't like talking in front of people. But I was a bit nervous, and I was talking with this Israeli guy, and then he starts talking to me, and he's just, he's opening up about all this stuff, about how, about his story. So he was Jewish, but only kind of nominally, and he really was at the point of his life where he was kind of stepping away from that and trying to see what he really believed for himself. And so he was talking about how he heard about this shelter, and he heard about it through word of mouth, and someone said, oh, well, it's a really nice place to stay, but it's a bunch of Christians, because everyone knows that's where the Christians are, but it's free to stay, so you got to give and take. And he said, I specifically came here because I heard you guys were Christians, and I wanted to hear about what you guys believe, basically. So I had this whole long conversation with him, me and some other volunteers, about what he believed and what he knew about Christianity, and he knew very little. But we went over a lot of messianic prophecy with him, and first he was a little bit apprehensive. He was like, well, we interpret it like this and that, and kind of giving reasons for it. And then at one point he was like, well, that word, we were getting down to the word, and like I don't know the specific words of it. But then the guy who runs it, Dylan Harris, is like, here, take this Bible. So he takes this Bible, and it has the Hebrew right next to the English, and we're going over it with him, and he gets to see it in his own language, saying, oh wow, it really does say that, and just really making some connections. And to me, that was really one really cool experience. One, because just to have that conversation, it was like hours long, but also because a lot of the stuff that we had talked about was what I was about to present on that very day. So I was like, I feel like I already had this conversation, but I just got to go over it again, and then bring all that messianic prophecy back to Christ. And he was so impacted by it that he said, man, I wish I had one of these New Testament Bibles that you have. And that's another thing that the shelter does, is that since there's all these travelers from all over the world, they have Bibles in every language. And so we were like, we have one for you. And so he took that New Testament with him as he went off. And yeah, so that was one of them. Another one was this guy, Michi, who's from Germany. I speak some German. I'm not great, but I can talk. And I had a good bond with him at first, right off the get-go, just because I could talk with him in German, and he was very surprised that I could speak German, and we started connecting with each other. And I was a little bit anxious about him because I had met another German previously, and Germans can be very standoffish, and but they can also be kind of like put up a fake politeness sometimes. And so the German before him, I thought he was like interested, and then I realized when we started talking about the gospel, I explained to him what it was, and he was just like, oh, okay, yeah. He just completely tuned out. And so this guy, Michi, I was a little bit worried, and then I started getting to know him and climbing with him. And I think that really helps too, is the climbing, is that you see these cliffs, you're 300 sometimes feet off the ground. You really got to trust the person that's got you in your rope. And so I climbed with him, and I think that really builds a bond with people, and you really start to open up more. And so that Friday, that Shabbat, it was someone else was preaching, and they gave a really good presentation of the gospel. And I could see him afterwards just kind of sitting there, because everyone has a Bible. And he's kind of just sitting there looking at it, flipping through it, like really, looking like really pensive. And I was like, well, okay, it looks like a perfect time to talk to him. So I was like, do you know anything about, this or anything? And he just goes, this is really weird that this is happening, because this actually is pretty familiar to me, because my grandparents used to do this when I was little. But ever since I was little, my dad didn't want to have anything to do with this. He didn't want to have anything to do with Christianity. But I always liked going to my grandma's, and she would do a little study with me like this. And he said it was specifically interesting because right before he left to go on this trip to Argentina from Germany, his grandpa had just passed away. And so his grandma talked with him and said, Germany has, I guess, this weird thing I didn't know about until I met some German people. But if you're born into the church, like a Catholic church, if you're baptized into it, you automatically pay tithe, like through your taxes, basically. And so his grandma said, he hasn't ever been to church since he was a baby. And so she's like, maybe you should think about, leaving the church officially, as far as the government's concerned, because, you're not really a Christian, and you're just paying this money, and it's not right that you're paying if you're not actually a Christian. And he said, well, maybe I want to think about it. He's like, I don't know if I even believe it or not. It kind of like Amir, the Israeli guy. He was like, I wanted to start thinking about it for myself. And so this whole trip, I was actually thinking about this, but I didn't know where to start. I didn't know where to read. I didn't know if there were churches that weren't so strict in Germany. He's like, I see all you guys, and you're all very different. It's more, evangelical church, like here. And so he's like, you guys aren't so strict. You guys are kind. You guys are, all these things. And so he was like, so they just started asking me all these questions. Like, it was just so like, God just put it right in my lap. Like, just, I didn't have to tell him anything crazy, just like where to start in the Bible. I knew some good German translations that were easy to understand, because they're easy for me to understand, because I can barely speak German. But and we just talked for hours about that. And he also ended up wanting his own Bible as we left, and then also he had a whole list of things that he wanted to read, because I kept on mentioning things. He's like, what's that? Tell me about that again. I want to write this down. He was writing it down on his phone, everything. And so that was just another really cool conversation that, yeah, just really, it couldn't have been anything else than, God putting me in the right place at the right time. Yeah, and one more was just a girl from Argentina, Juliana. She was very nice, very sweet, and she barely spoke any English. But I just wanted to talk about her because she came to the house and, just to climb, and then she found out we were Christians, and I never seen someone so happy to see other Christians. It was crazy. And so much so that when she went back home to her home in Buenos Aires, which is the capital city of Argentina and the largest city, we had like a week or so of traveling afterwards, all us volunteers. So we went out there to visit her, and she had her little apartment, but she let us come in and hang out, and she's like, talking with us like, so, and it's very hard because we're all learning Spanish and she's learning English, but, it's a good learning experience, but also a really big encouragement. One, that she was, so excited to see other Christians, and just kind of like impacted me a little bit, like, wow, like we should be excited to see each other, like we have something like so beautiful in common, and that's what unites us all together. That's a really precious gift that she doesn't have so much in a mostly Catholic, and in her city, not very Christian at all, environment. You kind of take it for granted sometimes, but also too just the universality of the church and how God's providence has brought the church to all over the world. You can see it through her, but through all of these cultures, all of these languages. The gospel is changing people's lives and bringing them together from ways you would never expect, scenarios crisscrossing, and yeah, that was another thing that really impacted me. I think I have one. Those are the main stories I wanted to talk about. I think we're going to do questions and stuff too. I don't know.
This first.
What did you say?
What's on the slide?
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Yeah, give the closing details first.
All right, okay. So yeah, they have some information to give out at the end. I was only there for 6 weeks, but the season for them in Argentina, their summer is our winter. So I was kind of at the end of the summer, and you can't really rock climb in the winter. It gets really snowy there, so they only do it from November to May. And so this season for them, the entire season, they had 129 guests stay, just so you kind of know how many people, and that's just not someone staying and leaving. If they stay, that means they've been there for multiple days, had many conversations, and at least heard the gospel clearly, at least once, if not multiple times. So that's kind of their impact there for this year. And then also, like I said, those people who, like, I want that New Testament, like, do you have one in my language? They give out 50 of those. So it really is an impactful, small but very impactful ministry that I'm very glad I got to be a part of, and I'm very grateful for you guys supporting me and praying any prayers as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. Thank you.
We are going to have a little bit of time for questions and answers as well. Again, I don't know how much the mic is picking up. So
Yeah.
you could try to repeat every question
Sure.
before you answer them.
Sure.
Just so that gets recorded.
Yeah. Yeah.
You didn't have a language barrier with Spanish and so forth?
I sure did. Yes, I didn't talk as much about the language just because of time, but I kind of, if you guys have questions about the language aspect of it, I'm sure to answer. I did, because I didn't know any Spanish, and you're only there for 6 weeks. I was immersed, so I got to practice it every day when I'm going to the store, going to the restaurants or whatever, but it took me, I would say the first 4 weeks, the 4 months or so, I was really discouraged. I'm like, man, and I was so busy with other stuff, I didn't have a lot of time to like dedicate practice as much as I would like to. And I was like, oh man, I'm never gonna learn this. And it wasn't until the last week or so that I was actually able to like order stuff on my own, talk to people that I didn't know, stuff like that, that it was really coming along. And then I had to leave. I was like, oh man, no, I was just getting the ball rolling, and now, yeah, so yeah.
And following up on that,
Yeah.
that was, you mentioned specifically the
Yeah.
goal. Like you couldn't
Yeah.
have gone to Germany for this trip.
I couldn't have gone to Germany because I knew about Germany. So that's the whole point. You're not supposed to learn the entire language in 6 weeks. It's pretty much impossible. But I was supposed to put things into practice that I had learned to be able to learn as best I can with that time. And then also, like I said, do the boring analyzing stuff as well. But yeah, yeah, yeah,
The New Testaments that you were
yeah,
giving out,
yeah.
were they what we call interlineal?
That, a very good
It
question.
has both languages in it?
Exactly. So the one that he read in Hebrew that we showed him, that was interlinear. That was just like you're saying, where you have one line and then one line. And that way you can look back and forth. It's really good for language learning as well. But the ones that we hand out, since it's their mother language, they were just in their language. And they're a lot more travel size, so they couldn't really, I guess you could make one that's travel size, but yeah, they're just in the native language, so no translation. Yeah.
Who supports these people?
That is what's crazy, is that they, like I said, they do everything by word of mouth. If you try to look, when I heard about this ministry, I one, didn't believe it because it sounded so cool, but also because I couldn't find anything on it online, because I was like, oh man, is this, and the guy who told me about it, he was like, yeah, you're going to have trouble finding it online. I just got to call you and talk to you about it, because he had told me about it months ago, and I was like, what was that thing you did? And yeah, they just make really good personal connections, and he does a lot of traveling back and forth to the States. He has some churches that he partners with, but he said that they do so well with their donations. Like, people want to help so much that he actually was fine. He was like, I'm actually fine for money this entire year. I will still take donations, but he's like, we don't really need anything. So they do very well. It's just insane that it goes that well by word of mouth, and that there's no like online donation thing, or
Farming or anything like that?
Yeah, so he does do, I will say he does do like real estate. So I don't know exactly, he said he makes enough real estate for himself to live, him and his family. He has 3 kids as well. But that doesn't really subsidize the ministry, I don't think. But he said it helps me and my family, and he's like, I make more than that than the donations for the ministry. But he was like, I don't exactly know the details of it, because I know he has, all the houses that I saw that he had were all related to the ministry. So I don't know how, but I guess he does. He probably has other properties somewhere. I don't know. I think he said he had one back in the U.S. in Portland or something like that. So I guess, yeah, it's pretty cool. He was also very good with all his finances and explaining it. So that was a really good lesson as well. Yeah, yeah, important, yeah.
As far as, did they give you numbers of how many different countries the
That-
129 guests?
No, but I could tell you it's a lot, because even while I was there, it was like the first week, it was like, 2 Germans, someone from Switzerland, Netherlands, Israelis. I don't know, but I wish that would be something to ask for, because I wonder if even keeps track of it. But you just get people from all over. It's like kind of crazy. But like I said, a lot of Israelis, and then a lot of Europeans as well. I guess climbing is just really big in those countries. So there is that. Not a lot of like Africans or something, I guess they're not into climbing, but I'm just guessing by who was there and who wasn't there, but yeah.
They're more distance runners.
Yeah, there you go.
Less disposable income, maybe.
Yeah,
play into it.
climbing is a very expensive sport, so that's another thing, is that you have to have some, like, all the gear. If you don't want to die, you gotta put in some money to it, So yeah, there is that as well.
You had to come with your own gear?
I came with some gear, but he's just been doing this for like, I don't know, 15 years or so, and he's slowly built the ministry up to a point now where the volunteers who come, you don't even have to have your own gear. You don't even have to know how to climb. If you just want to have the interest, they'll teach you how to climb, like do all the ropes, all that stuff, and he has all the gear. So once I learned that, I was gonna bring gear because I have some, but I don't have a lot. And once he told me that, I was like, oh, I'm leaving my gear, because it's just more weight I have to bring on the airplane. So yeah.
So do the guests like pick where you climb? Or?
Yeah, that's a good question too. It's so Argentina in general is very like a very chill environment, and like very go with the flow. You never know what's going to happen every day. Like there was a lot of even just not riots, what do you call it, strikes that would happen a lot, like for anything, the buses. So you didn't even know, you wake up that day, I want to go to the store to go to the bus, to go to the store. You don't even know if the bus is going to come because they could just go on strike. So everything was like very up in the air all the time. So a lot of times guests would be like, hey, I was wanting to go down to, this climbing spot or that hike. And so one person might be like, one volunteer, maybe I'll be like, oh yeah, let's go. I'll go with you. I'll walk down there with you. Or someone else wants to go one where you have to drive a little bit further. Someone's like, oh, I'll go. And we kind of let them pick and choose, but some of them don't know the area well. They just got there, so maybe we'll offer like, hey, we're going to go down to this place. You want to come? And then it's also on them if they want to come. So there's a lot of back and forth. Like we're suggesting, they're suggesting, as long as we're going out and climbing, because that's why we're all there. So yeah.
How long is the climb? Is it like
Yeah.
it's an all-day thing, or you're going for a couple hours?
That's another good question. It can totally depend because there's different levels of climbing. I don't know if you want to go back to some of these pictures, but you can climb a 300-foot wall and that will take all day, or you can climb, a shorter wall like this. You could climb that and you start to finish, you'll be done in 20 minutes. Like it's not very long. So it all depends on like that. That would take all day to go all the way up there, do all your climbing up there. So we'll have bigger trips every once in a while. That's like, okay, we're gonna do a big trip. Who wants to come? But there's even ones that, like I said, the backyard, it looks so beautiful. There's places that I could walk to in 5 minutes and just climb some with some of the guests, then go back home, get some food. Like it was a lot of variety. So that's why people like to go there.
Were people exerting themselves so much where they would regurgitate climbing?
No, but I have this one story that was crazy. I used it in one of those gospel presentations as an example because it was so scary. But go to that one, I think it's after this one. This wall right here. You can see someone right, I don't know if you can see them, they're right here. But that wall, it was a very new, the guy who makes the ministry, he's like a legend in that area for climbing because he sets all these routes. He does it all himself and he's been doing it for years. And so even the locals, you mention his name, they're like, oh yeah, I know Dylan. At first people would name drop him like, why are you saying our guy's name? Like they're like, oh yeah, him, yeah, okay. And yeah, so anyway, he makes these routes and these ones were really new. And so I'm climbing with this guy who's like 6'4", this Dutch guy, he was a volunteer. We climbed together a lot and he's way heavier than me. And so I'm belaying him, I'm at the bottom, and he gets to the top and I just kind of feel something happen and he's like yelling rock. I'm like, okay, well, you're supposed to get in, and I do the thing, but he gets back down at the end. Well, he throws it and I hear the huge crash and he comes back down and he's like, I was pulling, like you're really pulling on this like big thing. And he said it just ripped out right from under him like this, completely came off, which, I mean, if you don't climb, you think, oh, wow, that maybe happens all the time. That never happens. It was very scary. So I was like, it was crazy. It's a little bit worse than throw up, I would say. But if that would have landed on top of me, I'm dead. Like it was, yeah. So I use it as an example. Like, you really want to trust, but yeah.
What's the age group normally that goes up there? The older people or?
Yeah, that's another good question because there's also a surprisingly big range. Even the volunteers, like some of them were, like him and his wife, they had their own families. They were in their mid-40s, I'd say. And then another family as well. The two parents were probably mid-30s. That's probably the oldest that I saw, but you would see people.
That one looks like some young girl on the right.
Yeah, that's their kid, and she would help out too. She was not an actual volunteer, but she was part of the family that was one of the families. And so you do get a pretty good mix of ages, but she would come out and climb. Everyone here climbs. So, and even older too. So, and then sometimes you're out at the climbing area and you'll see people who are like, well into their 60s climbing. It's pretty cool. It's kind of a sport that if, you stay healthy, you can do for a surprisingly long time. Yeah. Yeah.
The volunteers that come in, you're considered a volunteer?
Yes.
Are they from a variety of denominations?
Yes.
Does that create any problem when you're having a study?
That's a good question too. And I was kind of a little bit worried about that at first, like, oh man, because I had to do like a little interview to be let into and because he had very specific doctoral statements on certain things. I was like, wow, this guy really has, I was kind of surprised because he's not a theologian per se, but he has these very specific doctrines, all these things, and I knew what they were. just because of my schooling and stuff, but I was like, oh, I was kind of surprised. I was like, oh man, some of these I'm like, I'm a little bit more this or a little bit more that. And I talked to him, and he's like, I just make it very clear what our ministries, like stances are in certain things, just so that it's very clear to everyone. But, he kind of talked about like, there's like room for first, we call it secondary things, like secondary doctrines that are very small, like minor. He's like, there's of course a lot of room for that, and our main goal is to, keep unity and keep peace with each other, rather than just like, oh, I'm super this or I'm super that on the most random little thing. So we didn't have any problems with any different doctrines, but there were people from different denominations, but nothing crazy. There was no like Catholics or something, but it was mostly evangelical Christians. I mean, it was all evangelical Christians, but.
Topics at a very high level.
What did you say?
Just kind of a higher level.
Exactly. Don't go into in the weeds. And when we're having those Bible studies, it's really not they call it a Bible study, but it's really a gospel presentation. So it's usually, like you're saying, it's a lot higher up. It's more of the broad things. You're not going to be getting into,
You're rock climbing, so it makes sense.
Exactly. We like to say hi. Yeah. Yeah.
I was going to say, so the volunteers can be basically trained
Yep.
while they're down there.
Yep.
How are the people who are coming to visit? What's the skill level?
That-
They're usually enthusiasts, but are they?
Usually enthusiasts, and that's another thing that the guy, because I'm not confident in a lot of things, but I do like rock climbing, and I'm usually pretty confident in myself. And so when I first got there, the guy Dylan, like, there's this little bit harder one, and I was like, oh, it looks like I could do it. And so I wanted to do it, and he was like, are you sure you can actually do it? Because we get a lot of people who come in here, say they can do it. I was like, oh, well, what I just walk into? And I learned from being there after a while, the guests that come in, some of them will say, oh yeah, I climb. And then you get there and they don't know how to belay or something, and they're doing something wrong, and that can kill someone. So that's why I realized he's just being very upfront, and like, he'd rather like scare you before you do the climb than like, for me, no one would have died it just would have been annoying to like, if I only did it halfway, you have to get someone to go up there, climb, take the rope down. So, but you get people from different ranges, and so you have to kind of test out. But usually if they bring their own gear, they have their own rope, you can if you're a climber, you can tell you can tell within like 20 minutes that, okay, this person's a real climber. Let's go do some harder climbs. If they were beginners, I would take them with a lot easier stuff. I'm not going to take them to somewhere where they're going to be bored and just like watch all the professionals go crazy or something. It's like, there's rock climbing. It's just like any sport. There's a lot easier stuff. There's a lot harder stuff. You just, so, yeah.
Am I understanding
Yeah.
this right? Is this mostly an outreach for people who do the rock climbing
Yeah.
versus any other kind of activity people might be interested in?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's mostly rock climbing. That's like pretty much everyone has that in common. And that's the activity they do the most because of the area. But I've mostly been focusing on rock climbing, but we also go hiking, we go kayaking, bike riding, all those kind of things. Anything outdoors, they had equipment for, and they had people that were interested in it. A lot of those things overlap. So if you're interested in climbing, you probably like kayaking, you probably like, the really tall guy on the right, he's a taller guy, bigger guy. He likes rock climbing, but not that much. His main thing is whitewater rafting. He loved doing that. So he would take people out to go do that. I never got to do that, sadly. It was a little bit too cold, but yeah, so there's a good range of it. And like I said, they have equipment for all of it, so yeah.
Last one, maybe, in regard to you.
Yeah.
You just graduated, so of course you don't need to know, you may not
Yeah.
know yet, but what are you at the moment leaning toward doing with
Yeah.
your degree, or what are you pursuing for your future?
Yeah, I'm leaning toward, like Sam said, I just graduated, so I'm not exactly sure. But I am leaning towards doing what's called language surveying with my degree, and that's specifically for Bible translation. So when you have a translator, usually they have to be very qualified. You have to not only have an undergrad like I do, but also a graduate in linguistics, because it's just a lot of hard work. And to translate the Bible, it's going to take about at least a decade to get a good chunk of it done. And so I wouldn't go straight into master's, even if I know that I want to do it. I still have to take some time off. But one thing that I was really interested in is what's language surveying, which is basically someone who has an undergrad like me, but then a little bit of training, and then you can go out to usually very remote areas and create language maps, basically. Where do they speak what language? Where do they speak what dialect? Where are the lines? What are the geographical, all those kind of things, so that they have all this good information so that when a translator does come in, they have all the information they need to get started and going. And it's a really good entry-level job for that kind of degree. Yeah.
All right. Well, again, Stephen, thank
All
you
right.
very much.
Thank you. Thank you.